Okay, so picture this. Harry and Meghan living it up in Montecito, right? Massive mansion, the whole California dream. But behind the scenes, things are apparently way less glossy than they seem. We're talking major financial drama, like $100 million in debt kind of drama. And the kicker? The royal family, specifically King Charles and Prince William, have basically said, nope, not our problem. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does a prince, someone who's literally been set for life since birth, end up owing that much money? It's a fair question, and honestly, the details are pretty insane. It all boils down to a few key things. The Montecito mansion itself, this obsession with lawsuits, security costs through the roof, and those streaming deals that went belly up. Let's start with the house. It's gorgeous, no doubt. Multi-million-dollar estate in one of the most exclusive areas in the country. But that comes with a hefty price tag. Apparently, they still owe a ton on the mortgage, like $14.65 million. And that's not even the worst part. We're talking California property taxes, which are insane. Plus, you need a whole staff to run the place. Housekeepers, gardeners, security, chefs. The report said it costs millions a year just to keep the lights on. To even break even, they need Hollywood blockbuster level income every single year. And that brings us to the streaming deals. Remember when Harry and Meghan signed those huge contracts with Netflix and Spotify? Everyone thought they were set, but both deals kinda imploded. The Netflix documentary did okay at first, driven by all the drama and controversy, but viewership dropped off a cliff after the first few episodes. And apparently Netflix wasn't thrilled with the other projects they pitched, so the contract wasn't renewed. The Spotify deal was even worse. Meghan did a podcast, Archetypes, but only put out like 12 episodes, and Spotify pulled the plug. One executive even called them grifters on his own podcast. Ouch. So those deals, which were supposed to be their ticket to financial independence, basically turned into a financial black hole. Now, let's talk about the lawsuit. This is where things get really crazy. Apparently, Harry has spent an estimated $28 million on legal battles, and it's not like he's winning these cases. He lost the one where he was trying to get the British government to pay for his security detail after he stepped down as a senior royal. Not only did he lose, but he also had to pay the government's legal fees. Millions of dollars down the drain. The report said that Harry approached these lawsuits as emotional vindication, not strategic business decisions. He wanted to punish his enemies and prove he was right instead of thinking about whether the cost of winning was worth it. And a lot of this legal warfare was financed through loans and credit lines based on the assumption that the royal family would step in if things went south, which, as we now know, isn't happening. But the biggest expense of all? Security. This is where things get truly wild. Since Harry lost his taxpayer-funded police protection when he left the UK, he's been paying for his own private security. And apparently, it's costing him an insane amount of money. We're talking $31 million over the past 5 years. That's more than most A-list Hollywood stars spend. Multiple armed guards, armored vehicles, counter-surveillance technology. The report said he's basically paying for presidential-level security on a podcaster's budget. It's a vicious cycle, right? He fears for his family's safety, which leads to spending more on security, which drains his finances, which forces him to do media deals that generate publicity, which then makes him feel like he needs even more security. So there's the breakdown of how Harry managed to rack up $100 million in debt. It's a combination of an expensive lifestyle, failed business ventures, and a whole lot of legal fees and security costs. But the real question is, why aren't King Charles and Prince William helping him out? Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Apparently, King Charles was initially inclined to help Harry out, like dad to the rescue, right? He didn't want a son of the king ending up in American bankruptcy court. Can you imagine the headlines? It would be a total circus, and Charles was worried it would make the whole monarchy look bad, like they were being cruel and vindictive. So Charles supposedly suggested a private settlement, a loan from his own personal wealth to cover Harry's most urgent debt. It would be structured as a loan, not a gift, with repayment terms and all that. And it would be kept confidential to avoid the public spectacle. Basically buy Harry some time to get his act together and find a way to actually make some money. But then Prince William stepped in and he was not having it. He basically shut the whole thing down. Apparently, William came armed with a document, this commercial liability assessment, which sounds super official and scary. And he argued that bailing Harry out wasn't just a family matter, it was a terrible business decision that would actually hurt the monarchy. William's argument was pretty brutal, honestly. He said that Harry's not just some private citizen living in California. He's a media content producer, and his main product is the royal family. Like, he needs them to be the bad guys in his story. So if they step in and save him now, the whole victim narrative falls apart. And then he'd be incentivized to find a new way to paint them as villains, just to keep the content coming. William even brought up examples: the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the memoir Spare. All of those happened after the family had tried to help or reconcile with Harry. Every time they showed compassion, it got weaponized. Every private conversation ended up as a chapter in a book. It's kind of hard to argue with that, right? And William made it clear that as the Duke of Cornwall, he controls a lot of money, and not a single penny of that is going to Harry to support a lifestyle that's built on attacking the institution that generates that wealth. He said it's not cruelty, it's just basic financial responsibility. He basically painted a picture where if they bailed Harry out now, they'd just be back in the same situation in a couple of years, facing an even bigger debt, because Harry's spending habits wouldn't change. And his business model wouldn't change. He's not just burned bridges, he's built toll booths on those bridges, charging people to watch them burn. Savage. Then Princess Anne chimed in, and she was even more ruthless. She's known for being super practical and no nonsense, and she basically said that Harry's financial collapse could be contagious and could actually damage the monarchy itself. She acknowledged that Harry's been through a lot, but that doesn't excuse financial recklessness or selling the family's privacy to pay for it. She even called Harry a toxic asset. In finance terms, that's something that's lost a lot of value and can't be sold, but it keeps draining money. She argued that as long as Harry's connected to the royal family financially, the institution is vulnerable to his decisions. And if they pay his debt, they're just validating his business model. You can't save someone who's determined to pull you under with them, she said. Harsh but fair. So after Anne dropped that toxic asset bomb, the meeting was basically over. Charles reluctantly agreed, and they moved on to the actual plan of attack. It's called the Street James Protocol, and it's basically a financial strangulation plan. Super dramatic, right? But that's what it is. William, being the mastermind behind this whole thing, laid out the three main parts. First, the sovereign firewall. This is total separation. Like, no money can go to Harry. Period. No direct transfers, no sneaky third-party stuff, nothing. They're basically deleting his account at the Bank of Dad, not just freezing it cold. Then comes the global credit freeze. This is where it gets really interesting, because for years, Harry's been able to get loans and mortgages because people just assumed the royal family would back him up. His last name was basically collateral, but now they're quietly telling all the major banks that Harry's on his own. The crown isn't guaranteeing anything, so his credit rating is gonna tank not because he missed payments, but because his family connection is gone. That's brutal. And finally, the legal firewall and communications blackout. No more negotiating, no more emotional appeals, no more calling up Dad to try and get him to change his mind. Any financial stuff from Montecito goes straight to a team of lawyers whose only job is to say no. The direct line to the king's checkbook is cut permanent. So William's looking at this plan and he's basically admiring his own work. It's this masterpiece of bureaucracy designed to cut Harry off completely while still being able to deny any cruelty. They're not taking away his titles or anything, which would cause a huge public outcry. They're just taking away the financial support that's always been there invisibly. It turns the Duke of Sussex into just a name, a brand without any backing. William's like, this isn't punishment, it's risk management. We're treating Harry exactly how he wants to be treated, as an independent guy who's responsible for his own decision. Meanwhile, 5,000 miles away in Montecito, Harry has no clue that his whole world is about to fall apart. He's probably scheduling meetings, making calls, living the California dream. For 40 years, he's just assumed that no matter what, the Bank of Dad would always be there. If he really screwed up, the palace would quietly step in, like they've done for other embarrassing royals before. Why would he be different? He's waiting for some confirmation from his bank, waiting for the cavalry to arrive. But it's not happening. The realization doesn't come with some big dramatic scene. It's just a humiliating phone call that shatters everything he's ever believed. His financial team calls the Duchy of Cornwall's office to talk about restructuring his debts. They're expecting the usual polite treatment. but instead, they get a lawyer from some outside firm. The lawyer is like, "I'm afraid that's not possible. No warmth, no negotiation." Harry's team is pushing back, saying the mortgage payment is due, the creditors are getting aggressive. "Does the king know?" they ask, getting desperate. The lawyer just says, "The directive comes from London. The royal household is strictly prohibited from helping the Duke of Sussex with his personal finance. Request denied. Good day." And then hangs up. Harry's staring at the phone, stunned. This is what they call the cold line, the moment when a royal realizes they've been cut off. Not temporarily, but for good. And it doesn't end there. A few hours later, he gets an email from the palace's lawyer. Not only is the bailout request denied, but they're calling in old debt, an invoice for the Frogmore Cottage renovation. The message is clear. You're not a beneficiary anymore. You're a debtor. Pay up. Harry's panicking, trying to go around the official channels. He calls a trusted aide at Clarence's house, someone who's always been a buffer between him and his dad. The number's disconnected. He tries emailing his private server, the one he's used for years to send family updates. Access denied. Account deleted. Another bridge burned. He walks out onto the terrace of his mansion, and the distance between California and England suddenly feels huge. He's been fighting a war against his family for 5 years, thinking that they'd still be there for him in the end, that if things got really bad, his dad would pick up the phone. But the Street James Protocol proves that King Charles the Dad has been overruled by King Charles the Monarch. The palace isn't yelling at him, they're not leaking stories to the press. They're doing something worse. They're ignoring him. They're treating him like any other celebrity in Montecito. Rich, famous, but totally powerless when the bills come due. Without that royal fairy dust, his value to creditors is zero. He's not a prince in exile anymore. He's just a guy with $100 million in debt and a disconnected phone line.